In the bustling chambers of the Washington, D.C. courthouse, a moment that would later become a viral sensation was about to unfold. Judge Patricia Wilson had served on the federal bench for over 2 decades, earning respect from her colleagues and the legal community for her sharp intellect and unwavering fairness. However, nothing could have prepared her for the encounter that would test not just her judicial composure but her very dignity. State Senator Richard Thompson had always been known for his controversial statements and confrontational style. His recent appearance before Judge Wilson's court for a routine hearing on proposed legislation quickly turned into something far more contentious. The hearing room was packed with journalists, legal observers, and members of the public, all expecting a typical day of legislative proceedings. As Judge Wilson began reviewing the proposed bill's constitutionality, Thompson's demeanor shifted from merely impatient to openly hostile. The tension in the room grew palpable as he interrupted her multiple times, his tone becoming increasingly dismissive. But it was his next statement that would send shockwaves through the courthouse. "With all due respect, Your Honor," Thompson said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "perhaps in your community, things work differently. But here in the real world of law and order, we need practical solutions, not social justice experiments." The room fell silent, the implications of his words hanging heavy in the air. Several observers later reported seeing a brief flash of pain cross Judge Wilson's face, but what happened next would become the stuff of legal legend. Instead of responding with anger or calling for order, she quietly closed the file before her and removed her reading glasses. The silence stretched for what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds. "Senator Thompson," she began, her voice steady and clear, "in my 30 years of legal practice, including 22 years on this bench, I've learned that the real world you speak of is far richer and more complex than you suggest." She paused, making direct eye contact with the now fidgeting politician. "I grew up in a housing project on the south side of Chicago," she continued, "where my mother worked 2 jobs to put me through school. I graduated top of my class at Harvard Law, served as a prosecutor for 12 years, and have presided over more than 3,000 cases. Each one of those experiences has taught me that justice isn't about community or color, it's about the Constitution and the principles we all swore to uphold." The courtroom remained absolutely still as she spoke, her words carrying the weight of decades of experience and wisdom. "So when you speak of real-world solutions, Senator, I must ask, which world are you referring to? Because in the real world I know, the one protected by this court, every citizen deserves equal respect under the law, regardless of their community." Several people in the gallery had tears in their eyes by this point. A young law clerk would later describe it as watching history being made in real time. Judge Wilson's response wasn't just a rebuke, it was a masterclass in dignity and professional integrity. The senator, usually quick with a retort, found himself at a loss for words. His face reddened as he shuffled his papers, mumbling something that sounded like an apology. The moment marked a turning point not just in the hearing, but in the larger conversation about respect and dignity in public discourse. As news of the exchange spread, social media exploded with clips of Judge Wilson's response. Legal experts praised her measured tone and powerful message, while civil rights leaders highlighted how her words resonated far beyond the courtroom. The incident sparked important discussions about professionalism, racism, and the role of respect in democratic institutions. In the following days, several of Thompson's political allies distanced themselves from his comments, and his office issued a formal apology. But perhaps the most significant impact came from the thousands of young law students and aspiring judges who found inspiration in Judge Wilson's response. The story didn't end with that viral moment, though. In the weeks that followed, Judge Wilson continued her work with the same dedication and impartiality that had characterized her entire career. When asked about the incident by a reporter outside the courthouse, she simply smiled and said, "In this court, we judge cases, not people. That's what justice means." Looking back, many would say that what made Judge Wilson's response so powerful wasn't just what she said, but how she said it. In the face of bigotry, she chose dignity over anger, education over confrontation. Her response became a textbook example of how to handle prejudice with grace while standing firmly for one's principles. The incident would later be included in legal ethics courses across the country, serving as a powerful reminder that true justice requires not just knowledge of the law, but the wisdom to apply it with dignity and respect. Judge Wilson had transformed what could have been just another ugly moment in public life into a teaching opportunity that would inspire generations to come. The aftermath of Judge Wilson's powerful response reverberated far beyond the courthouse walls. Within days, a local high school teacher had incorporated the video clip into her civics class, sparking intense discussions among students about civil discourse and racial equality. The teacher, Mrs. Chen, found herself amazed at how deeply the incident resonated with her students. "I've never seen them so engaged," she would later tell a local newspaper. "They're not just talking about what happened, they're asking profound questions about justice, dignity, and how to stand up for what's right." Her students had even started a project examining historical moments when grace under pressure had changed minds and hearts. Meanwhile, Senator Thompson's office was dealing with an unprecedented crisis. His inbox was flooded with letters from constituents, many expressing disappointment in his behavior. Longtime supporters began questioning their allegiance, and several major donors quietly withdrew their pledges for his upcoming re-election campaign. The senator's staff noticed a significant shift in his demeanor in the days following the incident. Gone was the brash, confrontational politician who seemed to relish controversy. Instead, they observed a more subdued man who spent long hours in his office, reviewing his past public statements and meeting with community leaders he'd previously ignored. One particular meeting proved transformative. The senator agreed to sit down with a group of African American judges from across the state, including some who had known Judge Wilson since her early days as a prosecutor. For 4 hours, they shared their experiences, challenges, and perspectives on the justice system. "It was like watching someone's worldview crack open," recalled Judge Robert Henderson, who attended the meeting. "Sometimes people need to be confronted with the human cost of their prejudices. But more importantly, they need to be willing to listen and learn from that confrontation." The story took an unexpected turn when an old photograph surfaced, showing a young Patricia Wilson volunteering at a legal aid clinic in the same neighborhood where Senator Thompson grew up. The image, dated 30 years earlier, captured her helping an elderly couple save their home from fraudulent foreclosure. The couple, it turned out, were Thompson's own grandparents. When confronted with this revelation, Thompson was visibly shaken. "I had no idea," he admitted during a press conference, his voice thick with emotion. "My grandparents always talked about the kind lawyer lady who helped them keep their home. They never mentioned her name, and I never asked." Life has a way of teaching us humility when we least expect it. The incident sparked a broader movement within the state's legal community. A group of senior judges, led by Judge Wilson, established a mentorship program for young lawyers from underrepresented backgrounds. The program, aptly named Bridges of Justice, aimed to create meaningful connections across racial, social, and economic divides. Local law schools began incorporating Judge Wilson's response into their professional ethics curriculum. Professor James Wong of State University Law School developed an entire module around the incident, titled Dignity Under Fire: Professional Ethics in Challenging Moments. Students would analyze not just what Judge Wilson said, but how her composed response exemplified the highest ideals of the legal profession. The impact reached beyond the legal community. Community organizations started hosting dignity dialogues, where people from different backgrounds could share their experiences and learn from each other. These conversations, while sometimes uncomfortable, helped bridge divides that had seemed insurmountable. Judge Wilson herself remained characteristically modest about her role in these changes. When asked to speak at a national conference on judicial ethics, she focused not on the incident itself but on the broader lessons it offered. "Our jobs, whether as judges, politicians, or citizens, she explained, is not to win arguments but to advance justice. And justice requires us to see the humanity in everyone, even those who fail to see it in us. The story took another surprising turn when Senator Thompson's college-age daughter, inspired by Judge Wilson's example, announced her decision to pursue a career in public interest law. In a heartfelt blog post that went viral, she wrote about how the incident had opened her eyes to her own privileges and responsibilities. Local community leaders began noticing subtle but significant changes in how public meetings were conducted. There was more emphasis on listening, more respect for differing viewpoints, and a greater willingness to acknowledge and learn from mistakes. The incident had somehow sparked a quiet revolution in civic discourse. A year after the courthouse encounter, Judge Wilson and Senator Thompson found themselves at the same charity gala. The room grew quiet as they approached each other, many wondering how they would interact. To everyone's surprise, they engaged in a lengthy, earnest conversation about criminal justice reform, finding common ground on several key issues. As this part of the story draws to a close, it's worth noting that real change often comes not from grand gestures but from small moments of truth that force us to confront our own biases and assumptions. The incident in Judge Wilson's courtroom wasn't just about one judge standing up to prejudice, it was about showing how dignity and wisdom can transform conflict into opportunity for growth. As the dust began to settle around the courthouse incident, a different kind of story started emerging from unexpected quarters. Lisa Thompson, the senator's daughter who had chosen to pursue public interest law, found herself at the center of a powerful narrative about generational change and personal growth. During her first semester at law school, Lisa obtained an internship at the same legal aid clinic where Judge Wilson had volunteered 3 decades earlier. The symmetry of this development wasn't lost on anyone, least of all her father. Senator Thompson, who had once dismissed such work as social justice experiments, now found himself regularly asking his daughter about her cases and the people she was helping. One autumn morning, Lisa was reviewing old case files when she discovered something remarkable. Among the yellowed papers was a handwritten thank you note from her great-grandparents to their guardian angel lawyer, dated the same year as the photograph that had surfaced earlier. The note detailed not just the legal help they'd received, but how that assistance had allowed them to keep hosting weekly community dinners for neighborhood children who needed a safe place to study. "I never knew about the community dinners," Senator Thompson confessed during a family dinner. "My grandparents never talked much about those hard times." His voice grew quiet as he added, "I wonder how many other stories I've missed by not asking the right questions." Meanwhile, Judge Wilson's influence continued to grow in unexpected ways. A group of high school students who had watched her courtroom response launched a podcast called Dignity Speaks, where they interviewed people who had faced discrimination with grace and wisdom. The podcast quickly gained a following, attracting listeners from across the country. One episode featured an interview with Mr. Zhang, a local shopkeeper who had experienced racial harassment during the pandemic. He described how Judge Wilson's example had inspired him to respond to angry customers with calm education rather than matching their hostility. "When you respond to hatred with dignity," he explained, "you give people a chance to see their own behavior more clearly." The story took another interesting turn when a renowned documentary filmmaker decided to explore the ripple effects of the courthouse incident. As she interviewed people throughout the community, a pattern emerged. The impact hadn't just been about race relations or judicial conduct, it had sparked a broader conversation about how people treat each other in moments of disagreement. The documentary captured small but significant changes in everyday interactions. At city council meetings, speakers who disagreed now prefaced their remarks with acknowledgments of their opponents' valid points. School administrators reported a decrease in bullying incidents as students began applying the principles they'd learned from discussing Judge Wilson's response. During the filming, an unexpected connection came to light. The filmmaker discovered that one of Judge Wilson's first cases as a young lawyer had involved defending a small community center from closure. That center later became a safe haven for troubled youth, including a young Richard Thompson during his teenage years, though he had never known the identity of the lawyer who had saved it. As these connections became public, Senator Thompson felt compelled to dig deeper into his own past. He began visiting the community center, now run by its third generation of community leaders. During one visit, he found his own high school photograph on the wall of success stories, graduates who had overcome difficult circumstances to achieve their goals. The center's director, Mrs. Washington, remembered young Richard Thompson well. He was angry back then, like many of our kids, she recalled. But he had potential. We all saw it. She showed him records of his participation in their leadership program, funded by a grant that Judge Wilson had helped secure decades earlier. This revelation led to a powerful moment during a town hall meeting where Senator Thompson was discussing criminal justice reform. Instead of his usual talking points, he shared his personal journey of discovery. "I've learned that our lives are more connected than we realize," he said, his voice carrying genuine emotion. "The very institutions I once criticized were the ones that helped shape my path to success." Judge Wilson's approach to handling conflict began influencing professional training beyond the legal field. Hospitals incorporated her example into their conflict resolution protocols. Customer service departments used recordings of her response to train employees in maintaining composure under pressure. Even professional sports teams invited her to speak about performing under pressure while maintaining dignity. The story's impact reached education circles in an unexpected way. A group of teachers developed a curriculum called Dignity in Action, using real-world examples, including the courthouse incident, to teach students about handling conflict and bias. The program proved so successful that it was adopted by schools across the state. Perhaps most significantly, the incident sparked a series of informal dinner gatherings where people from different backgrounds shared meals and stories. These community connection dinners became monthly events, hosted in homes, community centers, and even the courthouse cafeteria after hours. During one such dinner, an elderly participant shared a perspective that captured the essence of the story's impact. "What Judge Wilson showed us wasn't just about handling racism or bias," she said. "She showed us how to hold on to our humanity when others try to take it away. That's a lesson that applies to every aspect of life." As this chapter of the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the most profound changes often come from unexpected connections and revelations. The courthouse incident had become more than a viral moment or a teaching tool. It had become a catalyst for examining how past actions and present choices weave together to shape communities and change lives. The story took an unexpected turn when a national education conference invited both Judge Wilson and Senator Thompson to speak about their shared experience. The prospect of them presenting together created buzz throughout the legal and political communities. No one quite knew what to expect, but everyone sensed this could be a watershed moment. The conference hall was packed with educators, administrators, and students from across the country. As Judge Wilson and Senator Thompson took the stage together, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. What followed was not just a recounting of the courthouse incident, but a candid discussion about personal transformation and institutional change. "I came to this podium as a changed man," Senator Thompson began, his voice carrying a humility that would have been unimaginable months earlier. "But what's more important is understanding how that change happened." He turned to Judge Wilson and added, "It wasn't just about that one moment in court. It was about discovering how our lives had been interconnected long before that day." Judge Wilson shared her perspective on why her response had resonated so deeply with people. "In that moment," she explained, "I wasn't just defending myself. I was standing up for every person who has ever had to choose between responding with anger or with dignity. And dignity, when chosen consciously, has a power that anger can never match." The audience listened intently as they discussed how the incident had sparked changes in their personal lives. Senator Thompson spoke about the family dinners that had become a weekly tradition, where discussions about privilege, responsibility, and justice had replaced surface-level conversations. Judge Wilson described how her chambers had become an informal mentoring space for young lawyers struggling with similar challenges. During the question-and-answer session, a young teacher from an inner-city school stood up. "How do we teach our students to respond with dignity when they face discrimination?" she asked. The response that followed would later be quoted in educational journals across the country. Judge Wilson leaned forward in her chair and smiled. "We teach them that dignity isn't about being passive or accepting mistreatment," she said. "It's about choosing how we write our own story. When someone tries to define you by their prejudices, you have the power to show them a truth they weren't ready to see." The conference became a catalyst for a new initiative called the Dignity Project, which would soon be implemented in schools nationwide. The program wasn't just about teaching conflict resolution, it was about helping students understand their own power to change narratives and challenge assumptions through measured, thoughtful responses. Back in their home state, the impact continued to ripple outward. Local businesses began incorporating dignity training into their employee development programs. The State Bar Association created a special committee focused on promoting respectful dialogue in legal proceedings. Even the state legislature adopted new rules encouraging more civil discourse during debates. One particularly moving development came from the courthouse security team. Officer Rodriguez, who had been present during the original incident, started a program called Guardians of Dignity for his fellow officers. The program taught security personnel how to maintain order while treating everyone with respect, regardless of their behavior. "What we learned from Judge Wilson," Officer Rodriguez explained during a training session, "is that maintaining dignity isn't just about how we handle the big moments. It's about the small choices we make every day when interacting with people who come through these doors." The story gained another dimension when a group of international students visiting the courthouse recognized Judge Wilson from the viral video. They shared how the incident had sparked similar conversations about dignity and justice in their own countries. The local story had become a global lesson in handling prejudice with grace. Judge Wilson's daughter, a high school teacher herself, incorporated these international perspectives into her classroom discussions. Her students began corresponding with peers from other countries, sharing stories about times when choosing dignity over conflict had changed outcomes in their communities. The courthouse where the incident occurred became something of a landmark. Visitors would often pause in the hallway where it happened, some taking pictures, others simply standing in reflection. The court administrator noticed that people seemed to behave differently in that space, speaking more softly, treating each other with more consideration. Senator Thompson's transformation continued to surprise many. He began holding regular, listening sessions, in communities he had previously ignored. During one such session in a predominantly African American neighborhood, he shared a revelation that stunned the audience. "I used to think leadership was about being the loudest voice in the room," he admitted. "Judge Wilson taught me that true leadership is about having the courage to listen, especially to voices we've tried to silence." The statement would later be engraved on a plaque in the state capitol. As this chapter of the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the impact of that courthouse moment had transcended its original context. It wasn't just about race, or politics, or even justice in the legal sense. It had become a template for how individuals and institutions could handle moments of conflict with grace and wisdom. A local artist captured this transformation in a mural painted on the community center wall. The piece showed two hands reaching toward each other across a divide, with Judge Wilson's words written in flowing script, "In the real world I know, every citizen deserves equal respect under the law." The mural became a popular spot for school field trips and community gatherings. As more stories of impact emerged, it became evident that the most profound changes weren't happening in the spotlight of public attention, but in countless small moments where people chose dignity over division, understanding over anger, and wisdom over retribution. These quiet transformations, multiplied across communities and generations, were slowly reshaping the fabric of society itself. The story took an unexpected turn when a prestigious university decided to conduct a comprehensive study on what they called the Wilson effect, examining how one moment of dignified response to prejudice could create lasting social change. The research team, led by Dr. Rebecca Chen, spent months interviewing people whose lives had been touched by the courthouse incident. What they discovered was remarkable. The impact hadn't just rippled outward, it had created what they termed dignity cascades, situations where one person's choice to respond with dignity inspired others to do the same, creating a chain reaction of positive change. One such cascade began with a high school student named David, who had watched Judge Wilson's response in his civics class. Months later, when faced with racial slurs at a basketball game, he remembered her example. Instead of responding with anger, he invited the opposing team's players to join a post-game discussion about stereotypes and mutual understanding. That discussion led to a citywide sports leadership program focused on breaking down racial barriers. The university study also revealed unexpected impacts in the business world. Corporate leadership programs began incorporating what they called Wilson wisdom into their training materials. One major company CEO shared how studying the courthouse incident had transformed their approach to handling workplace conflicts. "We had been focusing on policies and procedures," the CEO explained during a business conference. "But Judge Wilson showed us that real change happens when people feel seen and respected, even in moments of confrontation. We've seen a 40% reduction in workplace disputes since implementing these principles." The story gained another layer when Judge Wilson's childhood neighborhood organized a community celebration in her honor. During the event, elderly residents shared stories about her early years, how she would help younger children with homework, how she organized a neighborhood cleanup campaign, how she always stood up for kids being bullied. Mrs. Jackson, her former next-door neighbor, recalled a telling incident from Wilson's teenage years. "Even then, she had that same dignity," Mrs. Jackson shared. "When some kid spray-painted racial slurs on our building, young Patricia didn't get angry. Instead, she organized a mural project, turning that hate into something beautiful. That mural's still there today." Senator Thompson, who attended the celebration, found himself deeply moved by these stories. During his speech, he revealed something he'd never shared publicly before. "My own grandmother," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "used to tell me stories about a young girl in her neighborhood who believed in justice before she even knew what the word meant. I never made the connection until today. That girl was Patricia Wilson." The celebration sparked a new initiative called Neighborhood Heroes, documenting stories of everyday people who had chosen dignity over discord. These stories were compiled into a digital archive, becoming a valuable resource for teachers, community leaders, and anyone seeking inspiration in handling difficult situations. The impact on the legal community continued to evolve in surprising ways. Law schools across the country began incorporating role-playing exercises based on the courthouse incident into their ethics courses. Students would take turns playing both Judge Wilson and Senator Thompson, gaining perspective from both sides of the encounter. One law professor noted an interesting trend: students who participated in these exercises showed marked improvement in their ability to handle high-pressure situations during mock trials. "They're learning that maintaining dignity isn't just about being nice," she explained. "It's a powerful tool for achieving justice." The story took another significant turn when a group of international judges invited Judge Wilson to speak at a conference on judicial independence. Her address, titled "Dignity as a Judicial Tool," sparked a global conversation about how judges could maintain both their authority and their humanity in challenging situations. During her international visit, Judge Wilson met with local community leaders who shared similar stories of turning potentially volatile situations into opportunities for growth. A judge from South Africa described how he had used her example to defuse tensions in a highly charged political case. A magistrate from India shared how her story had inspired a new approach to handling caste-based discrimination in her courtroom. Back home, the impact continued to manifest in unexpected ways. Local theater groups began performing reenactments of the courthouse incident as part of educational programs. These performances would pause at crucial moments, allowing audiences to discuss alternative responses and their potential consequences. The story's influence reached into unexpected corners of society. Professional mediators reported using what they called the Wilson method, responding to hostility with calm dignity while acknowledging the underlying issues. Marriage counselors incorporated these principles into their practice, helping couples learn to disagree with respect. A particularly moving development came from the prison system. A group of inmates who had watched the video during a rehabilitation program started a peer counseling initiative called Dignity Behind Bars. The program helped inmates handle conflicts without violence, leading to a significant reduction in prison incidents. The research study also revealed how the incident had influenced parenting styles in the community. Parents reported using Judge Wilson's response as a teaching tool, helping their children understand the difference between reacting and responding to prejudice. One mother shared how her daughter, faced with bullying at school, had remembered Judge Wilson's words. Instead of retaliating, the girl invited her bully to join her lunch table. That simple act of dignity led to a friendship that would later inspire both girls to start an anti-bullying program at their school. As this chapter of the story draws to a close, Dr. Chen's research team concluded that the true power of Judge Wilson's response lay not in what she said, but in how she demonstrated that dignity could be both a shield and a bridge, protecting one's own humanity while creating opportunities for others to reclaim theirs. The story took a fascinating turn when a group of tech entrepreneurs approached Judge Wilson with an innovative proposal. They wanted to develop an artificial intelligence program that could analyze conflict situations and suggest dignified responses based on the principles she had demonstrated. While initially skeptical, Judge Wilson saw the potential for positive impact. The development team worked closely with her to understand the nuances of her courthouse response. They studied not just her words, but her tone, body language, and the way she had maintained both authority and compassion. The resulting program, called Dignity AI, became a groundbreaking tool for conflict resolution training. Local police departments were among the first to adopt the technology for their de-escalation training. Officer Maria Ramirez, a veteran training instructor, noted remarkable improvements in how officers handled tense situations. "It's not just about keeping calm," she explained. "It's about maintaining everyone's dignity, even in the most challenging moments." Meanwhile, Senator Thompson's ongoing transformation led to an unexpected initiative. He established a scholarship fund for underprivileged students interested in public service careers. The fund was named the Wilson-Thompson Bridge Builders Scholarship, symbolizing the bridge that had been built between two seemingly opposing perspectives. During the scholarship's inaugural ceremony, a moment occurred that many would later describe as magical. A young recipient, the daughter of immigrants, shared how her family had faced discrimination similar to what prompted the courthouse incident. "But now," she said, "thanks to Judge Wilson's example and Senator Thompson's change of heart, I believe we can transform any moment of prejudice into an opportunity for understanding." The story gained another dimension when a renowned psychologist, Dr. Yamamoto, began studying what he called the dignity ripple effect. His research revealed that people who witnessed acts of dignity in response to prejudice were more likely to respond similarly in their own lives, creating a multiplication effect that extended far beyond the original incident. One particularly striking example came from a small business owner named Carlos Martinez. After watching Judge Wilson's response, he completely redesigned his company's customer service training. "We now teach our staff that every complaint, every angry customer, is an opportunity to create a dignity moment," he explained. His business soon became known for its exceptional handling of difficult situations. The impact on education continued to evolve in unexpected ways. A group of elementary school teachers developed a program called Little Judges, where students would role-play challenging situations and practice responding with dignity. The program proved so successful that it was adopted by schools across the country. During one such session, a third-grade student provided an insight that left the adults in the room speechless. "Being dignified doesn't mean you're weak," she said. "It means you're strong enough to help someone else become better." Her comment was later included in a national teaching guide. The courthouse where the incident occurred became part of a civil rights dignity tour, alongside other historical sites where individuals had responded to prejudice with remarkable grace. Tour guides would often pause in that courtroom, allowing visitors to sit in the same spaces where this modern moment of civil rights history had unfolded. Judge Wilson's approach began influencing unexpected areas of society. Sports coaches incorporated her principles into their leadership style. One high school basketball coach reported a complete transformation in how his team handled referee calls they disagreed with. "We went from having technical fouls every other game to being known as the most sportsmanlike team in the district," he shared. The story took another powerful turn when a group of former gang members credited Judge Wilson's example with helping them change their lives. They formed an organization called Street Dignity, working to resolve neighborhood conflicts through dialogue rather than violence. Their success in reducing gang-related incidents attracted national attention. During a community forum, one former gang leader explained the impact. "Judge Wilson showed us that real power isn't about making people fear you. It's about earning their respect through how you handle disrespect." His words resonated deeply with the young people in attendance. The international impact continued to grow as diplomatic corps began incorporating Judge Wilson's principles into their training programs. Ambassadors and diplomatic staff studied her response as an example of how to maintain dignity and effectiveness in culturally sensitive situations. A particularly moving development came from a conflict resolution center in a war-torn region. They adapted Judge Wilson's approach to help communities heal from decades of ethnic tension. The program, called Dignity Bridges, helped former enemies find common ground through facilitated dialogues based on mutual respect. The story's influence reached into the world of mental health care. Therapists began using what they called dignity-based response therapy to help patients deal with trauma from discrimination and prejudice. Instead of focusing solely on processing anger, they helped clients find ways to maintain their dignity while working through difficult experiences. One therapist shared a breakthrough moment with a client who had struggled with workplace discrimination. "When we watched Judge Wilson's response together," she recalled, "something clicked. My client realized she could choose how to write her own story, rather than letting others define her narrative." As this chapter of the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the ripple effects of that courthouse moment had created waves of change in ways no one could have predicted. From artificial intelligence to gang intervention, from international diplomacy to elementary school classrooms, the power of choosing dignity over discord was proving to be a universal tool for positive change. The story took an unexpected turn when a major film studio approached Judge Wilson about creating a documentary series exploring how different communities had implemented her principles of dignified response. Rather than focusing solely on her courthouse moment, the series would showcase how ordinary people had transformed their own conflicts into opportunities for growth. The first episode featured a small town in the Midwest where factory closures had created tension between longtime residents and new immigrants. Using Judge Wilson's approach, community leaders had transformed hostile town hall meetings into productive dialogues about economic renewal. The result was a collaborative business initiative that revitalized the town's economy while bridging cultural divides. Meanwhile, Senator Thompson had begun working with a coalition of politicians from across the political spectrum to promote what they called dignity-first leadership. The initiative focused on changing how political debates were conducted, encouraging substantive discussion over personal attacks. The results were surprising even to the most cynical observers. During one particularly heated legislative session, a debate over immigration policy took an unexpected turn. Instead of the usual partisan rhetoric, legislators began sharing personal stories about their families' journeys to America. The session ended with the passage of a bipartisan bill that one reporter described as a triumph of dignity over division. The story gained another layer when a group of tech-savvy teenagers created a social media platform called Dignity Share. The platform allowed users to share their own stories of responding to prejudice with grace, creating a supportive community for people facing similar challenges. Within months, it had millions of users worldwide. One viral post came from a retail worker who had faced racial harassment from a customer. Instead of responding with anger, she had channeled Judge Wilson's approach, turning the confrontation into a teaching moment. The customer later returned to apologize, and they ended up working together to organize diversity training sessions for local businesses. The impact on healthcare was particularly noteworthy. Dr. Patel, a prominent hospital administrator, implemented what she called dignity-based care protocols. The approach transformed how medical staff handled difficult patients and family members, leading to improved outcomes and reduced workplace stress. We discovered that maintaining dignity isn't just about being nice, Dr. Patel explained during a medical conference. It's about creating an environment where healing can happen, even in the midst of tension and fear. The protocol was soon adopted by hospitals across the country. The story took another significant turn when a group of veterans began applying Judge Wilson's principles to help fellow service members deal with post-traumatic stress. They created a program called Dignity Warriors, teaching veterans how to maintain their sense of worth while processing difficult experiences. One veteran's testimony particularly resonated. In combat, we learned to respond to threats with force. Judge Wilson showed us there's another kind of strength, the strength to face hostility with dignity. That's helping many of us find peace in civilian life. The influence on education continued to evolve as universities began offering courses in what they termed applied dignity studies. These interdisciplinary programs combined elements of law, psychology, sociology, and conflict resolution, using the courthouse incident as a central case study. Professor Zhang, who developed one such program, observed an interesting pattern. Students who master these principles aren't just becoming better professionals, they're becoming better people. They're learning that how we handle conflict shapes not just the outcome, but who we become in the process. The story's impact reached into the world of professional sports in an unexpected way. A Major League Baseball team hired Judge Wilson as a consultant after several high-profile incidents of racial tension. Her work with the team led to the creation of a league-wide Dignity in Sports initiative. During a crucial game, when a player faced racial taunts from the crowd, he responded with a gesture of peace that brought the stadium to silence. Later, he credited Judge Wilson's training. She taught us that our response to hatred can either escalate it or transform it. I chose to transform it. The business world continued to find new applications for Judge Wilson's principles. A major tech company created an AI-powered customer service system that incorporated dignity-based response patterns. The system helped service representatives handle difficult interactions more effectively, leading to higher customer satisfaction and employee retention. Environmental activists began applying these principles to their advocacy work. Instead of confrontational protests, they initiated dignity-based dialogues with corporate leaders. One such dialogue led to a groundbreaking partnership between environmentalists and industry leaders, proving that maintaining dignity could bridge even the widest ideological gaps. The story gained another dimension, and international peace negotiators began incorporating Judge Wilson's approach into their methodology. A veteran diplomat shared how these principles had helped break deadlocks in several long-standing conflicts. When you respond to hostility with dignity, you create space for solutions that weren't possible before. As this chapter unfolds, it becomes increasingly clear that the power of dignity as a response to prejudice transcends cultural, professional, and social boundaries. Each new application of these principles reveals another facet of their universal appeal and effectiveness. 5 years after the courthouse incident, a remarkable gathering took place in the city's largest convention center. People from all walks of life, educators, politicians, activists, business leaders, and ordinary citizens, came together for what was dubbed the Dignity Summit. The event wasn't just a celebration of Judge Wilson's legacy, it was a testament to how a single moment of grace could transform countless lives. The summit opened with a surprise announcement. The state legislature had unanimously passed the Wilson Act, requiring dignity-based conflict resolution training for all public servants. Senator Thompson, who had co-sponsored the bill, could barely hold back tears as he made the announcement. 5 years ago, I was the problem, he admitted. Today, I'm part of the solution. That's the power of responding to ignorance with wisdom. During the summit, a series of speakers shared how the courthouse incident had influenced their fields. A Silicon Valley executive revealed how their company's dignity-based AI had evolved to help millions of users navigate difficult conversations. A group of international peacekeepers described using these principles to resolve conflicts in war-torn regions. But perhaps the most powerful moments came from ordinary people sharing their stories. A young store clerk described how she had defused a potentially violent situation by channeling Judge Wilson's calm dignity. A teacher spoke about transforming a hostile classroom into a supportive community. A former gang member explained how dignity-based conflict resolution had helped him become a community mediator. Judge Wilson, who had initially been reluctant to attend such a large celebration of her actions, found herself deeply moved by these testimonies. When she finally took the stage, the entire convention center fell silent. Her speech would later be described as a master class in humility and wisdom. "What happened that day in my courtroom wasn't about me," she began. "It was about a choice we all face when confronted with prejudice or hatred. Do we let it diminish us, or do we use it as an opportunity to demonstrate the power of human dignity?" She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "What amazes me is how many of you have taken that simple choice and transformed it into a movement for positive change." The summit featured workshops on implementing dignity-based approaches in various settings. Healthcare workers shared techniques for maintaining composure in high-stress situations. Teachers demonstrated methods for teaching children about responding to bullying with dignity. Business leaders discussed how these principles had transformed their corporate cultures. A particularly touching moment came when a group of students from the Little Judges program performed a series of role-plays demonstrating how they had applied these principles in their own lives. Their performance brought many in the audience to tears, showing how the next generation was already carrying these lessons forward. The technology showcase at the summit revealed how far the dignity-based approach had spread. Virtual reality programs allowed users to practice maintaining dignity in challenging situations. Mobile apps provided real-time suggestions for de-escalating conflicts. Social media platforms showcased algorithms designed to promote respectful dialogue over inflammatory exchanges. During a panel discussion, Dr. Chen presented the findings from her 5-year study of the Wilson effect. The data showed significant reductions in workplace conflicts, school disciplinary incidents, and community tensions in areas where dignity-based response training had been implemented. "What we're seeing," she explained, "is that dignity isn't just a nice idea, it's a practical tool for social transformation." The summit also addressed the challenges ahead. Participants discussed how to maintain dignity in an increasingly polarized world, how to teach these principles to new generations, and how to ensure that the movement remained true to its core values while adapting to new contexts. A powerful moment came when Senator Thompson and Judge Wilson co-hosted a session on transforming adversaries into allies. Their genuine friendship, forged from that moment of conflict, served as a living example of how dignity could bridge seemingly insurmountable divides. The international impact of the movement was evident in the diversity of summit attendees. Delegates from over 50 countries shared how they had adapted the dignity-based approach to their cultural contexts. A peace negotiator from a conflict zone described how these principles had helped rival communities find common ground. As the summit drew to a close, a surprise announcement captured the spirit of the movement's future. A coalition of global organizations had created the Wilson Dignity Initiative, a billion-dollar fund to support dignity-based programs worldwide. The initiative would focus on education, conflict resolution, and community building. Judge Wilson's closing remarks at the summit reflected both humility and hope. 5 years ago, I simply chose to respond to mockery with dignity, she said. I never imagined that choice would spark such change. But looking at all of you today, I realize that dignity isn't just a response to conflict, it's a path to transformation. The story's impact continues to resonate, not just in grand initiatives and global programs, but in countless small moments where people choose dignity over discord, understanding over anger, and wisdom over prejudice. As one summit participant noted, the true miracle isn't what happened in that courtroom 5 years ago, it's what happens every day when ordinary people choose to respond to hatred with dignity.